Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on the Lopes Goes Last podcast channel. Let's all give a warm welcome back to Andy Riley. It's been quite a while since I've had Andy back on the channel, and if you guys have seen the my most recent podcast episode or the video I did on the World Series, I mentioned in there that I was going to invite Andy on the show, and he very cordially accepted. So, Andy, welcome back. How are you, my friend?
I am doing good. Thank you so much for having me back. I am definitely ready to talk some baseball with you, buddy.
For sure. I'm very excited. And again, it's been way too long since I've had you on the channel, and I will take full 100% blame for that. It's been pretty bananas. But what's also been bananas has been this 2024 MLB season. It has been a very strange one. I felt like 2023 was odd, especially at the beginning because you had like the Pirates that were like a playoff team for half the year, and then suddenly they lost like every game for the rest of the season, and it was just a very strange time. But this year, my goodness, it was a weird one.
I think this year probably takes the cake. I mean, let's just
Yeah.
if you go off the AL Central alone, seeing
Yep.
how many genuine contenders there were, and I
Oh yeah.
mean, even when you look later in October, like three out of the four teams in the division series were from the AL Central, and I don't think anybody really had that on your bingo card.
Oh
That's
no. Definitely
insane.
not. Definitely not. If I know we talked a little bit before we actually hopped on this recording part of this about the MLB preview video that I did, obviously at the beginning of the season with Dan Lindsay, another friend of the channel. And if you'll recall, in that video, we both pretty much agreed that the AL Central was the worst division in baseball. Like, that's what our feelings were going into the year, and boy, were we proven horrifyingly wrong. Now, I will say, I will take credit where credit is due. I did say that the Royals were going to be a lot better than people expected this year. And it turned
Right.
out that that was correct. I didn't expect them to be this good. I think I said, I could see them winning 75, maybe even 80 games. I didn't expect them to win 85 or 90 games or whatever they ended up with. So
I'll say the Royals were the team I was most focused on. I'll say I'll be transparent. I'm guilty of in the regular season. I can kind of isolate on the Braves and be like, okay, everything else I'll check on from time to time. But given that the Royals made the offseason acquisition of Braves legend Will Smith, me and Ryan Bruce had definitely made a wager as soon as that deal happened where Bruce was like, "Okay, now if the Royals win the World Series, will you finally admit that Will Smith is like the greatest great that ever played?" And I was like, "No, there's no shot, He's in Kansas City, like, what's there's no way." And then I'm not gonna lie, I was sweating for a very, very about that. And he definitely did not forget about, the comments I had made about the Will Smith
sure.
signing. And um no, it was a weird season, I'll say that.
Yeah,
Completely
man. And we're talking about the AL Central, the Detroit Tigers. Like it's like a switch flipped in, late August, early September, and they just went on a crazy run that I don't think any of us anticipated. Um, and it's almost even hard to pinpoint a particular reason as to why. Like oftentimes when somebody, or not when somebody, but when a team kind of turns things around, you kind of have an underlying stat that you can go by. It almost just felt like they went, "Hey, let's just start playing better." And
I
it's just that simple.
I feel like I can almost pinpoint it, 'cause, he's not a podcast, he's not appeared on the podcast, but we both know of Luke McMullen, who is still one of
Yes.
my very, very good friends. Like, we talk
Sure.
Tigers and Braves baseball all the time late at night, in between sets at the gym and everything.
Of course.
And I've been and through him, I can pinpoint the exact, time that, the Tigers got hot, and that
When
is
they benched Javi.
when they
Yeah.
benched Javi.
I knew it. I
Um,
was like, I know where
I
he's
will
going with
say
this too.
I'll solve that mystery right there.
Ah,
The greatest math equations you have in sports, where you have addition by subtraction.
sure. Yep.
Javi was he was not providing any value whatsoever,
No.
and I'll even go farther. I think that this version of Tigers baseball we got in October might be Moneyball performed to its absolute best.
Right.
I know the Rays have had plenty of low payroll teams come through. I know obviously the A's, they've had movies filmed about, their
Yep.
playoff runs early 2000s with it, but what the Tigers were doing was unprecedented. Like their highest paid player in the playoffs, I think, was only making like 2 million. That is
Unbelievable.
literally unbelievable. And even the way they were winning games was so much fun to watch. I jumped on the Tigers bandwagon very shortly after the Braves unceremoniously got bounced, and I had a fun ride. I'll say that.
Sure.
They were really fun to watch, and I really hope that they can do that again next year. It won't be the same surprise element of surprise this year had,
Right.
but 162 games of that, I would subscribe.
I certainly would too, and I'm glad you brought up the Braves because that's actually a great transition into my next point and talking point here. So obviously, for those of you watching that have not are not familiar with Andy, he is obviously, as he's mentioned a couple times here, big Braves fan. As is my wife, as is I should say, a lot of my friends. So quite familiar with Braves baseball here. And so I have two questions for you, and I'd love to hear your answers back to back here. Number one, did you want to punch me in the face through the screen when I said that the Braves would not make the playoffs? And two, how do you feel about this year? I mean, besides the obvious, I'm sure it's, a little bit disappointing, but you had this unbelievable record shattering, just almost almost parody of a regular season last year to just get bounced in the playoffs, and then you follow it up with the same exact roster with the addition of Chris Sale, who may win Cy Young.
He will win
And
Cy Young. I would go that far to say
sure,
probably.
he's definitely the favorite. And yet you were significantly worse this year at all levels. Like what do you think went on there? So I'd love to get your perspective on both those things.
Okay, so for the first question, no, I didn't really want to punch you in the face. Look, preseason, everything, nobody knows what's going on. We can all, feign it. If you go back, you'll hear me claim that Spencer Strider was going to have a breakout year in 2022. There's no way I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't expect that. In the same sentence where you said the Braves wouldn't make the playoffs, you said the AL Central would be the worst team. We all have like ways to make educated guesses about, where things are going to fall. And at the end of the day, the NL East is a very strong division. I mean, say what you will, the Phillies are absolutely no team that you can just walk over. We knew that going in. We were reminded of that, throughout the entire summer. Um, and like the Mets don't get enough credit for what they did this year.
Yeah.
I don't like to go out and compliment the Mets, but I'll give credit where credit's due. They were a scrappy little bunch.
Mm.
So it's definitely realistic that especially when you have a record-breaking year like we had in 23, it's really, really difficult to do that again in 24. But I don't hold any grudges over anything said preseason because you know, baseball is such a lovely sport. Anything
Yeah.
can happen. And what best case scenario, we prove you wrong, and I just get to laugh in your face a little bit.
You did prove me wrong by one game. You had to win your last game to make it. But I was sitting there like, oh, if they don't make the playoffs, this is going to be a disaster. But you did, and then you got.
I will say, I don't know if I've confined you with this information. I don't know if you've seen it, but I was actually at that doubleheader against the Mets.
I did not know that. No.
I was in attendance for both of those games, and that was some of the most stressful baseball of my life.
Sure.
But when you ask, like, how do I feel? Now this is going to feel very hypocritical, and I don't like hypocrites whatsoever. It's one of my biggest pet peeves because you're going to hear me later on, talk about how the Yankees can't be satisfied with simply making it to the World Series. That can't be enough for them. However, given all the hurdles the Braves had to, get through, like we lost Acuna back in May. Ozzie was down for a lot of the season. We lost Spencer Strider on start number 2. Max Fried was down for a big portion of the year. Austin Riley missed like the entire last month. Sean Murphy got hurt opening day, never really got back to full speed, what we know he's capable of. We had so many obstacles to overcome from that record-breaking year that I am dumbfounded that we somehow scrapped together 89 wins and made it to October. And if anything, this year makes me more thankful for the run we've been on in the past, winning the East
Sure.
over and over again, because it can be really easy to overlook that just making it to October is absolutely an accomplishment in and within itself.
Yeah.
And while we broke several records last year, there wasn't really a time period that I was ever stressed. Like, okay, we need to win this game now, or else, it's all for nothing. And this year brought out sweats that I haven't sweated since, we tracked down the Mets and sniped it from them back in 22. It was a really fun year, and I think a lot of good things came out of it. I'll get into the biggest takeaway I have is that Spencer Schwellenbach is absolutely him. I
He's
mean,
great.
there's a lot of pitchers where you're like, okay, he had a good rookie year. Can he replicate it? I don't know if I've ever felt as confident that somebody can sustain what they did as I feel about Spencer Schwellenbach.
Okay.
That man has a wonderful noggin on his shoulders, and he is an incredible competitor. I am such a big fan. And obviously Chris Sale, oh my God, like there's really nothing I can say that y'all don't already know about how unbelievable he was, and seeing him every fifth day was a treat.
It was, and it was a treat for me for years too. So it certainly is it's nothing, nothing that I'm not familiar with. Obviously, there's a part of me that says, oh, like really, like you couldn't have, but it was so funny. I don't remember where the tweet came from, but there was it was towards the end of the season where somebody hit a hard line drive right back at Chris Sale, and he just snagged it out of the air, and it was like 107 miles an hour off the bat.
Right.
He had to kind of duck a little bit, and the tweet was, if he was wearing a Red Sox uniform, both his arms and his chest would have exploded. And I'm like, probably. I mean, pretty much, unfortunately, yes. So it's one of those things where it just, it didn't work anymore in Boston. The team around him was not good enough to compete, and we needed somebody like Vaughn Grissom, who's perfect for us. At least on paper, right? We still haven't seen him kind of reach his full potential yet because he was injured for a lot of the season, so we'll see. But somebody like that, I thought it was fine. Obviously, you guys needed Chris Sale right now, and we need to help rebuild. So I thought it was a perfect trade for both sides. And there's no hard feelings, at least on my part, and I hope there's no hard feelings on any Red Sox fans' part, because he's just so freaking fun when he's playing that well. He's one of the most fun pitchers in baseball to watch, and he's that slider is ridiculous, and his changeup's gotten better over the years. He's so good, and so I'm actually genuinely happy that he got back to form.
And I don't know what AA puts in his cereal in the morning or whatever to be able to know that, hey, this guy's going to have a renaissance. He's going to go back to, peak Cy Young form, when he hasn't been healthy in a while. Nobody saw that coming.
No, nobody saw it coming.
That. I like the signing. I was excited to get him, but there's always in the back of my mind, I'm like, we'll get maybe 2 months out of him, and then he'll be like, oh, I've thrown 50 innings. My arm's starting to hurt a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He's an old man, and that delivery is very taxing on a person's body. Mm-hmm. So like, I know that a lot of our early playoff bounce was accredited to him getting like, back injuries, like, at a very, very inconvenient time. And obviously I think that, if we had Chris Sale starting game 1 instead of AJ Smith-Shawver, things might have been a little bit different.
Right.
But I mean, I can't in any, there's no way I could ever talk bad and be like, oh, how could you, be hurting when we need you the most? Because
the only reason y'all made the playoffs is because of Chris Sale.
Close to getting there without him.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, who would I be to say anything about that?
Sure. Fair enough. Well, all right. I appreciate that perspective, Andy. Let's talk about the World Series. So we just witnessed I don't know if I can say it was one of the best World Series ever. I honestly don't think it was. I think it was. I think it was one of. It's going to be one of the most talked about. It's going to be one of the most memorable. It's going to be one of the most um, publicized, I would say. But I don't think it was one of the best World Series. I think that there have certainly been ones that were better than this one. But
Mhm.
there's a lot to dig in. There's a lot to dive into as it pertains to this World Series. So
I will say off that point, I think we can confidently say it might be the best 5-game World Series we've ever had. That might be a fair take. I have
okay,
trouble thinking. I only one that would even come close might be that Dodgers Red Sox one back in
that's
18.
yeah, and and you got to from a Red Sox fan's perspective, that's where my mind went. I'm like, well, it wasn't no Red Sox Dodgers, so like like that's where my mind went, right? Oh man.
Think about games that were insane. I think Game 1 and Game 5 are absolute classics. That
Absolutely, no question.
They are not going to be forgotten about anytime soon. And really, like for the Red Sox Dodgers ones, the most memorable one was by far the one game the Dodgers freaking won. And
Yeah.
that was
Oh, for sure. Ridiculous. Yeah.
you know, but this was literally insane television, and I was really grateful that I got to watch every single pitch of it. 'Cause,
Sure.
oh my God, so much happened.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of Game 4 was a bit of a nothing burger. Like it was over by the third inning, fourth inning. Like there was
It was
no
a nothing burger, but even in that game, there were a lot of things that happened that led to Game 5 being Game 5. And the biggest unsung hero I've seen so far is I don't even know his first name, but that pitcher whose last name is Knack for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
He ate innings like crazy.
Yeah.
And I've got a few gripes with the way Dave Roberts managed his bullpen in the 5th game. I definitely don't think that was the perfect thing that everybody's claiming it is. He had goofs, but he would have not had the freedom to do that if Knack didn't go out there and absolutely eat innings.
Yeah, for sure.
And people like that, and we can even go back to 2018, that World Series that we've established is holy and all that. But in the one thing y'all lost, think of Nathan Eovaldi and how big it was that he got through. I think every single extra inning. Am I correct in that?
So I believe so. I believe he came in the 10th and he pitched until the end. I believe
right.
so.
And I'm just saying y'all do not win Game 4 and Game 5
Nope.
as easily as y'all did if he didn't.
No, and I know at least for the Red Sox Nation, and I would hope the community at large, right?
Mm-hmm.
That feeling was instantaneous. Like it did not matter. Like obviously it mattered that we lost that game, but it didn't matter at the same time. It was an instant. My God, Nathan Eovaldi just had one of the best pitching performances I've ever seen in my entire life.
Right.
I mean,
even as a neutral fan, I'm watching this, and part of me is like, this is one of the best games I've ever seen in my life.
Oh,
but
yeah.
in the back of my mind, I'm kind of like, Eovaldi is really putting the Red Sox in a crazy good position.
And think about this, at least from my perspective, the Dodgers won that game on a walk-off home run in the World Series, and the longest World Series game in history, and gained zero momentum from it. Exactly. That's what it felt like. Because everybody in the world knew, yeah, great, good for you, but my God, look at what Nathan Eovaldi just did. I feel like that was the general consensus, and I don't think Knack's getting that same... Now, obviously, he didn't have as iconic of a one long moment that Eovaldi did, but he did kind of have a similar role, for sure.
It was a similar role, and he needs to get a lot more respect out of what he did. Because
I don't know what his first name is either. I don't know why I'm thinking Preston.
Andrew, I kind of have a bias.
Andrew could be Andrew.
I seem to be like nobody that has a good performance. He's probably an Andrew because I'd be biased.
Landon Knack. There it is.
I would have never guessed that.
Well, I guessed Preston just because I was like, generic white guy name. That might be it.
You were closer than me.
Hey, fair enough. Well, anyway, so again, there's a lot to get into with this World Series. and we've gotten into it a little bit here, obviously. But I want to talk. I want to start with kind of the Dodgers and their perspective on it before we get into the juicy stuff with the Yankees, because there's quite a bit to get into there. Obviously, I put out like a four. It's going to come out. It hasn't come out as a time of recording, but it's going to come out soon here. Like a 40-minute or 35-minute thing on mostly the Yankees. So I have a lot to say. I had a lot to say. I still do. But we'll get to the Dodgers first. So obviously, it's not close. Freddie Freeman is the MVP of this series. He struggled mightily for most of the playoff run. I believe he was having ankle issues, I believe, or a foot issue.
I believe it was an ankle.
And so that obviously probably played a part in his struggles. And then now, once he got healthy, he regressed to the mean. And it was a very, very hard regression to the mean, or progression in this case to the mean. So other than Freddie Freeman, who we'll talk about in a minute as well, who is the other guy? I know you talked about Knack, and he may be your pick, I guess. Who is the other guy that you would point to and say, this guy played as big a role, or maybe slightly less of a big role, in the Dodgers winning this series than Freddie Freeman?
Well, I mean, I think this is going to be another cop-out, and me being the PO self that I am, I gravitate towards the pitchers, and but that being said, Walker Buehler, holy crap, what a performance. We have to keep in mind, I know he's been dealing with a lot of elbow stuff. He had, I believe, his second Tommy John surgery, which is unfortunately becoming way too frequent. They have multiple of those. That's a different story we could go on a tangent for an hour about.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, he had a mediocre season. Even I remember when the Dodgers came to Atlanta, I was talking to somebody, I don't remember who, but I was like, yeah, we faced Walker Buehler in one of these games. He's not the same Walker Buehler that, we've grown accustomed to being the ace of the Dodgers. He's regressed. His fastball's not there, He's a different guy.
Looked like it was just fine.
You wouldn't realize that based off the World Series. And it started really, I feel like, didn't he have a good game in the championship series? It started there. And then to come, and I don't care what you say, any World Series game in Yankee Stadium is a very hostile environment.
Absolutely. And it's a hitter's ballpark.
Absolutely. I mean, it's basically the MLB version of Montreat College, where you look down the right field line and you can high
I was about to say you can high five the foul pole. Yeah.
You can be like, "Hello, fans, good to see you." Or they might rip the ball out of your glove when you're trying to pitch.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that too.
We'll get into that later, but that would be very detrimental to your wind up, I think.
I would think so, yeah.
But to come in Game 3 and really just set the tone, because I certainly wasn't expecting that out of him in Game 3. But the difference between a 3-0 series lead and a 2-1 is astronomical.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think there's ever been a World Series team that's come back from 3-0, a 3-0 deficit.
Nope.
Obviously, we know about the Red Sox and all that fun stuff, but in the World Series, comebacks like that don't happen.
No.
And then even more to come back and close out Game 5, which I think, again, we'll get into this probably more later. But towards the tail end of Game 5 was a lot of bullpen misuse by Dave Roberts, and Walker Buehler made it appear like he had a plan. And he came out and got the 3 biggest outs of his entire life in really dominating fashion.
Yeah.
And all was well. So he is absolutely my MVP of all people not named Freddie Freeman.
Fair enough. Yeah. I like that answer. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's really easy to kind of go with somebody like Mookie Betts, who also played fantastic throughout this whole playoff run. I think easily his best playoff run of his career. Anybody who's followed Mookie Betts' career, obviously me being a Red Sox fan, I was there for the vast majority of, other than the last, 3 to 4 or 5 years. How long has he been in LA now? It's been 4 or 5. Has it been 5 years now? I think it's been 4 years or 5 years now.
Did he leave right after that MVP season in 18?
No, I think he left in. I'm pretty sure he left in 2019. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because I know he was a part of the 2020 COVID playoff team in LA. I
Yeah,
know he was
he
there for
won that. He won that World Series. I know that for a fact.
19, I don't know for sure.
Okay, so I'm
I
pretty
don't.
sure it's been 5 years. So other than the last 5 years, I watched every single second of every single Mookie Betts playoff game, and that 2018 playoff run, he didn't hit his first home run until the World Series.
Right.
When everybody else was just, I mean, there was a game where we put like 17 runs up on the Yankees, and he went like 1 for 5 or 1 for 6. Like he just a lot of his career, he just did not perform well in the playoffs. So this is not coming from a perspective of parody or anything like, oh, it was his best playoff run when he's had a bunch of good ones. He hasn't really had a bunch of good ones, honestly. Right. He's had a bunch of mediocre ones and some bad ones, and then he had this one. So this is easily, to me, his best playoff run.
He had a big point in the offseason leading into this year about how he felt really responsible for the Dodgers' easy bounce last year in 2023. He felt like he was a big part of that, and he made it a part like, hey, in these big games, I need to be able to come through. And he turned that around,
Sure.
That's an understatement saying that, but he definitely, took personal accountability for underperforming, and he made efforts to fix it, and he
did. Yeah.
That's
that's why I have so much respect for Mookie, and he's the one guy that I still can't believe we let go. I still am just baffled that we had all those guys, and you'd think you would choose some of them, and you didn't choose any of them. You chose to have them all leave. Which I think is crazy, but regardless, he's not who I'm picking here. It's actually a combination of two players, because I actually am putting them in the same boat. Tommy Edman and Kike Hernandez. To me, the combination of those two guys, their defense, and listen, I think you and I have played baseball long enough to know that while obviously your thumpers are your 1 through 5, your most important hitters in your lineup in big games are your 6 through 9. That's your most important, because without those guys, those 1 through 3, 1 through 4, 1 through 5, I mean, maybe 4 and 5 would be okay, depending on what 2 and 3 do, but you're not going to have much of a shot if the bottom of your lineup, basically every 3 innings, you have 3 free outs or 4 free outs.
Right.
And Tommy Edman and Kike Hernandez, whether it was a big moment or whether it was not a big moment, whether you were down by 8 or up by 1, they always seem to make every single at-bat a tough out. They always seem to get on base, which for Kike Hernandez is not something that he does. Like, he's not an on-base guy. Go ahead and look at his career statistics. 250, 260 batting average, 305 on base on a good year, really? Like, he's not somebody that gets on base frequently, but he was taking walks, he was getting C&I singles, he was making things tough for Yankees pitching, whether it was a righty, whether it was a lefty, whether it was a guy who was throwing junk, whether it was a guy who was throwing 102 miles an hour. It didn't matter. He was going to make it tough for you. And then Tommy Edman, I can't say enough about how much I wanted to punch everybody in the Cardinals organization when I saw that trade. I was like, out of all the people that you're going to trade to the Dodgers, you're going to trade, in my opinion, the second most versatile player in baseball outside of Jerickson Profar. Like, a guy that could just play all 8 positions, hits lefty, gets on base, steals bases, plays great defense at all positions no matter where he plays. Like, I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
He's got the making of a future San Diego Padre. It's just a development literally anywhere. Like, at this, let's sign Tommy and let him be a 2-way and pitch. I don't think he would be awful at it.
He probably wouldn't. He'd probably be fine. He'd probably be just fine. So, like, he's a guy that I couldn't believe that the Cardinals traded him for. I don't even want to know what they got in return. 2 of me. I don't know. Like, what did they get for nothing? I assume. No, maybe just cash. I don't even know. But regardless, that to me, as soon as I saw that, I was like, he is going to be the guy that's going to be the unsung hero of this Dodgers team. I knew it, and I knew that they sold. It was so crazy because I'm pretty sure it was 2 years ago that he was an All-Star. I'm pretty sure it was 2 years ago that he was an All-Star. And then he gets hurt last year, and it carries over into this year. And instead of them trading him 2 years ago when they were last in their division, and he was an all-star, they waited until he was hurt for a year plus and traded him for nothing. And it's just, it was so ridiculous. But anyway, Tommy Edman, Kike Hernandez, those are my two picks. I think that without those guys just battling it out at the bottom of that lineup, Shohei Ohtani's struggles would have been a lot more pronounced. Mookie Betts wouldn't have had as many opportunities to drive runs in. Freddie Freeman wouldn't have felt so free, probably, during a lot of his... I mean, I even think about, just think about Game 5 anyway, right? So the Yankees are up 1. Kike Hernandez leads things off with a base hit with no outs in the top of the 8th when it's basically their last chance to do anything.
Add on to that, the 5-run inning in the 5th was also started by a Kike Hernandez.
Exactly. And that's just, exactly. And Tommy Edman right behind him.
And I'll say, and you're thinking at the bottom of the lineup, obviously Edman and Kike are two big heroes. I think it's worth throwing Gavin Lux in that mix.
Absolutely.
Well. I don't have his numbers for the World Series in front of me. They probably aren't as good as those two, but he had some huge RBIs and some some of the most important at-bats.
Yep.
Especially towards the last 2 games, because I think by then he was hitting into 9-hole consistently. And when you are the guy hitting in front of Shohei, you have to make the most of your at-bats if anything's going to happen. Because no matter what, you're going to get pitched to. Because no pitcher, and I'll attribute a lot of my growth in pitching to I could pick out one person in the order and be like, I am not letting him beat me.
Mm-hmm.
I would wager that Shohei was probably that guy that the Yankees circled and were like, hey, do not let him get a big at bat with people on base under any means possible. And if he does, we're going to throw any lefty, even Nestor.
Poor Nestor.
try and get it. Now, should they have highlighted Freddie Freeman instead of Shohei? Probably.
Yeah, especially by Game 4. Minimum Game 4. Well, yeah, I would say, and probably before that, but I'm saying especially Games 4 and 5, with Shohei struggling and Freddie Freeman hitting a home run in every single game. I would have ventured to say you should probably avoid Freddie at that point.
And I'll get into this when we talk about the Yankees later, but how in Game 5 in the first inning, once they got Shohei and Shohei and Mookie out. I don't know why I blanked on who hit 2-hole for a minute.
That's okay. It happens. It happens.
After you got those first 2 out, how do you not just be like, let's just put Freddie on,
I don't know. I don't know.
Let's just let him have first base. We'll take Teoscar with 2 outs and Freddie on first over,
Teoscar also had a nice series as well.
Yeah, and I'll say when we talk about, how is Freddie getting pitched to so frequently, is because Teoscar Hernandez he might be the biggest offseason pickup that happened in baseball this year.
And that was my least favorite move of the offseason. I hated that.
But I mean, boy, did he ever deliver. And
he was great. Mm-hmm.
And he protected 3 MVPs back to back to back, and you still have the pitch to Freddie because you're like, Teoscar's
good, yeah.
Walk in the park. And how somebody gets that slept on while winning a home run derby in the same year, I'll never understand, but it's true.
Yeah.
And, if you're like, Teoscar is absolutely a threat. So
for sure. And again, the reason why that was my least favorite move is because Teoscar really, to me, he was that guy that I looked at as the one-trick pony that was getting paid way too much money. I mean, he was making upwards of $20+ million to only hit home runs. He didn't get on base very much. He didn't walk a lot. He struck out a ton. All he did was hit home runs. And it's one of those things, especially with, with that last year. I think it was in Seattle, I want to say.
I think so. I'm not positive.
He was hitting 220. out there in Seattle, I'm pretty sure. So like I'm like, why would the Dodgers want to bring that for that much money? Like I looked at it as like you can get as good a player for a lot cheaper. But obviously that turned out to not be the case. He proved me wrong on that. And good on him. That's why they paid him all that money. That's all well and good.
I feel like Teoscar, and I'll throw Adolis Garcia in this category as well.
Mm.
They remind me as somebody that's on the fast track to have a Nelson Cruz-like career, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Ish. Now, of course, I can't, make that comparison. If they do it for,
well,
5,
you can
10
definitely make that comparison with Adolis Garcia, considering he's a Texas Ranger right fielder.
Right, and especially not to mention that he's, having all this success in like his late 20s, early 30s, exactly the same way Cruz was.
Sure.
There's just certain people that you throw in that category where you're like, your main reason here is to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And as long as they're doing that, they're going to have a job.
Sure.
And, Oscar has definitely earned his stay, and I feel like did he play left field for them? Yes.
Teoscar, yeah, for a lot of the year he played left field. He played some right field because and I have a hard time keeping track because Mookie played second base for them a lot and shortstop for them for most of the year, and then when Tommy Edman came back, they moved him back to right field, and so it just was it's kind of hard to keep track.
Took a lot of reps in center too. There were plenty of times which, I mean. We can get into that later. I think on the Braves playoff run, we watched Lux try to do that, and he did not have a very fun time.
No.
So just how seamlessly, that transition was for Edman is just, a further testament to Edman that he's, crashing Teoscar Hernandez's section too.
Yeah, for sure. And again, with Teoscar, I'm more than happy to admit I was wrong about how successful that signing would be, and I think he's a perfect fit out there in LA right now. I always thought that he'd be, and another reason why I thought was because he's not that great on defense, and so I figured he'd be a DH somewhere, and I just, unless you're Shohei Ohtani, or unless you're Yordan Alvarez, I do not want to spend $20+ million on a designated hitter. I just don't. So, that's unless you're one of those two guys who very much deserve to make as much money as they want, then to me there's no reason to spend that much money on a DH. But obviously he played a lot of outfield this year, because of Shohei Ohtani being the DH for most of the time. So
right.
But anyway, so here's the question that I'm sure you've been dreading, or maybe or at least I've been salivating at asking you, Andy. So long-time listeners of this podcast will know that at one point, this is several years ago, in which Freddie Freeman left the Braves to sign with the Dodgers. And the Braves then subsequently, I think it was like even same day or day after, or maybe just a couple days before, whatever it was, traded for Matt Olson. And, a few weeks into the year of 2023, Matt Olson's, doing great. He had a phenomenal year. And our friend Andy here, as well as another mutual friend, Ryan Bruce, who, by the way, Bruce, this is going to come out after your wedding, but congratulations, my friend. I hope you have a wonderful wedding. I'm sorry that I cannot be there, but regardless, both of you said in many ways that you would rather have Matt Olson than Freddie Freeman. On a scale of 1 to I'm on fire, how much do you regret that statement now?
I am 100% on fire. No hesitation. I am.
Oh boy.
Look, there was, if you look back at our answers, we had our reasoning, and we're like, Freddie, Matt Olson might fit the Braves culture or whatever, maybe better than Freddie, but you want a culture that Freddie thrives in. Those are the ones that bring championships. And and I'm going to get it. Freddie went through so much adversity this year. Because a lot of people remember the ankle thing that he was dealing with. I got him the Kirk Gibson comparisons. people will forget that this year also one of his sons was like,
Yeah.
he had to take leave because he literally woke up paralyzed one time, and that is a frightening, frightening moment for any father.
Yeah.
And the way that and Freddie did the right thing and left the team, until it was all resolved,
Hmm.
things were on the right track. But to go through that is enough on its own to
Of
like
course.
recommend. And and he came back and led the Dodgers to 98 wins and whatever, and then had the one of the best World Series performances I think that I've ever seen in my entire life. And
Yep.
like, and we're gonna, and you could tell it was different based off his first at bat in Game One when he, inside out's a ball beating the shift. Which, and I'll say to somebody that's watched, the number of Freddie Freeman at bats I've watched is well into the thousands.
Sure.
I don't know why they shift on him. It makes 0 sense. He can slap a ground ball, like, right where the third baseman is on command. And, of course, Verdugo, boots it around, takes his time, and Freddie, on, like, a bad ankle, motors his way to third.
Hmm.
And that's when everybody's like, "Okay,
Freddie's
Freddie
back.
really wants this."
Yep.
And, like, was Dave Roberts happy? Probably not, but baseball fans were happy.
Absolutely.
And he And, obviously from there, he just built it into, like, one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough to say otherwise. I don't think, at least in my opinion, it was the best performance. Again, I'm biased, but please go back and look at David Ortiz's 2013 World Series. He literally hit like 600. Like
That's fair.
he couldn't you couldn't get him out. Like it was, and the only time he got out was like lineouts. Like he just like or balls to the wall. Like there was no, like, you couldn't get him out. But other than that, yeah, I mean, obviously you couldn't really get Freddie out either. He came through in every big moment, every game. He was unbelievable. But it is that time, Andy. Let's get into the good stuff. So I checked the statistics before I hopped on here to do this with you so that I could get the updated numbers. The videos that are coming out today, that came out today as the time of recording, and it's going to come out later on in the weekend. They talk about Aaron Judge hitting 140 in the World Series. Now, he did not end that way. He did a little bit better in Game 5. Obviously, he had a home run, and so he ended up hitting 189. That was his final line. Now, obviously, that's putting lipstick on a pig. Like
Right.
it's still a pig, dude. It's still awful,
Right.
but it's not as awful as 140. So I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give that credit where credit's due. He had a good offensive Game 5. I'm not gonna say he had a great overall Game 5. He had a good offensive Game 5. But regardless, what the heck happened to Aaron Judge?
Look, I've played baseball long enough. You've played baseball long enough. We know exactly what was going through his mind right there. There are sometimes we can't explain it. You can take thousands of reps, but sometimes when a pitcher's throwing the ball, it looks like a little BB. And you can't read spin no matter what. Some days you can read everything perfectly. Some days you just can't see anything at all, and you go through a slump. And the harder you try to get out of said slump, the worse it gets. And it is one of the most lonely feelings in baseball. And it's like the hitter's version of the yips. And the yips are so bad, people don't even like to say the word. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we're just looking Game 1 and he struck out 3 times. Game 2 he struck out 3 times. And it is clear he's not striking out because Flaherty or Yamamoto are carving him up with their best stuff. I can read a hitter's eyes and swing path really good. If you had a fastball up in the zone or a curveball down in the zone, he is not touching that baseball, no matter what. And it's a lonely feeling. And it actually was one of the first things that made me think, hey, let me go text Lopes and see what he thinks. Because I'm sure he's watching the game where I'm like,
Yeah.
is it borderline a fireable offense for Aaron Boone to have Aaron Judge hitting in the 3-hole in the most important games the Yankees have played in like almost 15
Yeah.
years when he's going through that?
Yeah.
Um, And my answer is still, I think it might be. Or it doesn't matter what I think. I know the answer is going to be yes for
For a lot of Yankees
a
fans,
lot of
absolutely.
Yankee fans. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, it was painful to watch because everybody that's played baseball has been there before,
Yeah.
and it is really brutal to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I know, at least in college, right? You were kind of PO. You've mentioned it a couple times here. So I know you hit a little bit in high school. So I don't know how much experience you have with year after year, summer after summer, day after day, full time hitting. You may have years of experience with that. I just don't. I just don't know it.
I mean, how do you think I became a PO, Mr. Lopes? When the soccer hit just got so bad, they were like,
Oh
"Hey,
boy.
let's go shoot this racing horse and just let him pitch."
Fair enough. Well, luckily, I never fully wound up getting that bullet in the back of the head. I was able to cling by a pinky on the edge of the cliff for about 3 years, but um, I like you said, it's the loneliest feeling in the world when you work that hard, when you do that much film, or when you watch that much film, when you take that many reps in the batting cage, live pitching, just dissecting everything, making minor mechanical adjustments, and then suddenly you're like, man, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe I just shouldn't make any mechanical adjustments. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe I'm not thinking enough. Maybe I'm this. Maybe I'm that. And it becomes where hitting now becomes a science, and that's when it gets bad. And the problem is you feel like it has to be a science until you start having success, but because you're looking at it as a science, that's why you're not having success. It's just this, and that's why slumps can be so debilitating and can take so long to get out of.
Mhm.
Sometimes they could be years long. Look at poor Javier Baez that we've mentioned. That guy used to be unbelievable at hitting, and he hasn't hit a ball in years the way he used to. I mean, this is years of not seeing the ball right out of the hand and chasing every off-speed pitch out of the zone and hitting every ball that he does make contact, it feels like off the end of the bat because his swing path is so long and so wide. Like, it's just, these slumps are so debilitating that I felt bad for him because it's
Yeah,
one of these things where he's getting just, and listen, it's New York. This isn't Kansas City. This isn't Cincinnati or Pittsburgh or Milwaukee where he can hide from the media. This is New York. You are in the spotlight, and this is
trust
not. Yeah, go ahead.
I know how brutal Phillies fans can be. I'm not undermining what they're capable of, but the Bronx is the worst place to be in a situation like that because that fan
Absolutely.
expects rings. We'll get into it more, but like when the Yankees get to the World Series and do what they did this time, they are not happy. They are not going to look back at this and say, "Well, it was a fun run. We almost had them. Let's get it next year." No, they want answers. They want responses. And it's something that I don't think the Yankees have really had to deal with in their history almost what happened. Because I was, doing a little bit of research today while thinking about it. And because I was thinking, did Derek Jeter, Bernie Williams, Andy Pettit, did they go through anything like this? And the
No.
answer is no. Because when they first came up in '96, they beat the Braves. Then they won in '98. Then they won in '99. Then they won in 2000. And sure, they choked away, or the Diamondbacks won, however you want to look at that, no one. But at that point, they'd won 4 out of the last like 5 or 6 World Series.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can let one get away, and you're like, okay, well they still know how to do it. What happened this October is seriously, and I was listening to the Talking Yanks podcast, which I will say I do enjoy.
I also enjoy it. Yeah.
Um, and they were seriously, it wasn't like we're close. They were like, we got to the big stage and we are nowhere near capable of winning at this stage yet, based off what happened. Which
Absolutely.
is not something Yankee fans are going to just let go of or get, content in. They are going to, fight and claw to find the root of the problem, and Javi Baez addition by subtraction it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up because this is something that I said at the beginning of the year when I did my predictions. Right, I said that the Yankees were going to be just like they were last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, just slightly better. They may even make it to the World Series because they are like, listen, I said this in my podcast episode recently. Juan Soto is really good. He is
Yes.
exactly what that team needed at the top of that order to spark plug that. You needed a guy like Juan Soto to be Juan Soto and to get on base a lot, to hit 30 plus home runs, to have a 400 on base percentage. Like, this is what you need. And you need Aaron Judge to do what he did in 2022. You can't have it to where he's hitting 35 home runs. No, he's got to hit 45, 50, 55, 60. Like, he's got to be up there. And then this team's going to be halfway decent if their pitching actually kind of holds up. But
Right.
their bullpen wasn't good. Their rotation wasn't good. The rest of their lineup, for the regular season at least, was not very good. It was a two-horse race in that Yankees team. And guess what? Those two horses are so generationally good that it carried them to 94 wins.
Mm-hmm.
That's how good Juan Soto and Aaron Judge are. I am not sitting here trying to explain to everybody that Juan Soto and Aaron Judge are not good baseball players, because that's a blatant, patented lie, and anybody who says that is a liar and you should not listen to them. Mm-hmm. However, the Yankees got lucky this postseason that Giancarlo Stanton was performing as well as he did. Please, I urge any of you, go back in history and watch Giancarlo Stanton perform in the playoffs. You will see strikeout after strikeout after strikeout after strikeout pretty much for his entire career. Yeah, obviously he runs into one every now and again. He has a decent game every now and again. But the vast majority of his Yankees career has been not performing in the playoffs. And you got lucky that Giancarlo Stanton was performing in this year's playoffs because his running mate Aaron Judge was not performing. Juan Soto, at 21 years of age, had a better postseason track record than the entire Yankees roster. So you add him in, you have one guy that's going to perform at the biggest stage. And sometimes, listen, I talked about the 2013 Red Sox already. We literally only had one guy that was performing well for the most part. It was David Ortiz. Go look at the World Series. Everybody was hitting around the Mendoza line, and then you had David Ortiz, and we won the World Series. Sometimes all you need is just one guy, but obviously they needed a little bit more. But regardless, my point is, I did not think that the Yankees were good enough to win the World Series this year. I'm just going to be honest with you. The reason that the Yankees got as far as they did was twofold. One, because of Juan Soto. He is 75% of the reason why they performed as well in the playoffs as they did. I'm giving the other 25% to Giancarlo Stanton. Without those two guys, the rest of that lineup was useless. Volpe did well sometimes. The rest of that lineup,
Volpe is the only.
Yeah.
Honestly, Austin Wells, I know his average wasn't great, but he impressed me. I think he is.
Yeah, he did what Austin Wells does. He hits 210 and he hits a home run sometimes. That's what Austin Wells does, right? So, like, and he did a lot better behind the plate than I anticipated him doing this year. He's never really been known for his defense, but regardless. So, Juan Soto is one reason. And the second reason, let's face facts, Andy. The American League is not good. The whole of the American League is not good. The Baltimore Orioles are horrifyingly, supremely, I will shout to the mountaintops with a bullhorn, overrated. I've said it for 2 years. I could not believe that they won 100 games last year because their rotation stinks. It stinks. Their rotation is awful. The only reason they won that many games is because their bullpen was so good that it saved their butts over and over again in the regular season. And by the time they got to the playoffs, they were like, like they were just dragging across the finish line. And what did they do this year? The same exact thing. Their rotation was horrible. Corbin Burns was great. Grayson Rodriguez was fine. Kyle Bradish was hurt for most of the year, so he didn't really do much. And they have another guy. Oh God, who's the other one?
Yeah, I got nothing.
I'm blanking, but right now,
the Braves' brain just
not great. So they're overrated. The Rangers, who won the World Series last year, this year might as well not even have shown up. This year, I mean, they were useless. They didn't do anything. The Astros, they were the only team that I picked them to go to the World Series. They were the only team that I looked at up and down the roster, and I said that team might win the World Series this year if they played somebody in the National League, because they have a lot of depth pitching wise. The problem is I didn't realize their entire starting rotation was injured going into the year. All five, all of them. They were all injured. That none of them were healthy, and that none of them would become healthy. Javier would never come back. McCullers would never come back. Gosh, I keep thinking Urias. It's not Urias. The
Urquidy.
Yes, Urquidy would not come back. Like these are important guys for your rotation. None of these guys would come back. Verlander would take a huge step back this year. You relied on a bunch of no names to get you through the year, and it worked. But obviously, you know, if the Yankees and the Astros, this construction of the Astros played in the playoffs, I don't care how good the Astros have been against the Yankees in the playoffs, they weren't beating them this year. They just weren't. So, what, you're going to say the Guardians are better than the Yankees? Of course they're not better than the Yankees. You're going to say the I don't even know, the Royals that made it, the Tigers made it? No. Like, none of these teams are better than the Yankees this year. And the Yankees were a two-horse race. They just were. So, if they had faced the Phillies, they'd have gotten smoked. If they'd have faced the Padres, they'd have gotten smoked. If they'd have faced the Dodgers, obviously they got smoked. If they'd have faced anybody outside of maybe like the Brewers or something, the Yankees would have gotten beat because they weren't better than anybody in the National League, in my opinion. Now, obviously, people are probably going to say, oh, really? Well, they had the second or third best record in the league, so it's pretty hard to... Yeah, because they were playing the American League, who stunk. The whole American League stunk this year. All of them. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents. But, yeah, man, it's really tough for Aaron Judge just to see him struggle that badly. But I do want to address what you said real quick. So we talked about this a little bit, and I want to clarify my comments. I put it in that video as well, so feel free if you want to go watch that too. You're more than welcome to get all my full thoughts on it. But look, I have seen Aaron Boone coach for the last 7 years now. It's way too many years. Right. I think he's one of the worst coaches I've ever seen at the major league level. I mean, he's not quite Bobby Valentine bad, but he's bad. I don't think he adds anything to that team. I don't think he has any kind of strict philosophy that he goes by. I don't think he has a rhyme or reason to a lot of the decisions that he makes. Like, to me, there's nothing to hang your hat on. Like when I look at a manager, right? Even if they're performing poorly, I like to look at, okay, well, what are they prioritizing? What kind of things are they prioritizing in their rotation or in their bullpen or in their lineup? Since 2018, the lineup for the New York Yankees has been virtually identical in style. It's a bunch of big righties that can't hit sliders from righties, that don't get on base, that'll strike out 30 to 35% of the time, that hit home runs, and then you sprinkle in a couple of useless lefties that hit 210 and get on base at a 290 clip. That's it. That's been the whole Yankees lineup since 2018. That's what it's been. And you can rotate any of those guys in. Now, this year, they had Jazz Chisholm and they had Juan Soto. And so you got two guys that kind of buck that trend, even though Jazz Chisholm's on-base numbers aren't that great. But it's this year, I mean, even look at a guy like Volpe. What? He's the exact same. He can't hit sliders from righties, and he just hits home runs. His average isn't all that good. He doesn't get on base all that much. Like, it's the same story. Now, I know a lot of that's probably not on Aaron Boone. You got to play who's on your roster. You know, he only has so much say in that. I understand that. But you know who you have had on your roster for the last, like, 4 years? Jason Dominguez, who's an on-base machine and is a defensive wizard and has been in your organization since he was 17 years old, and you refuse to play him. You will not play him. You didn't call him up. You didn't do anything because you'd rather have God knows who out in left field than Jason Dominguez for the last 5 years. So for me, Aaron Boone's always been a bad coach. But to me, sticking with the horse that got you to the race until the bitter end, while stubborn, while a bit stupid given the circumstances, while I don't agree with it, I can at least follow the logic. I can at least somewhat understand that perspective of, you know what, man? Yeah, he's struggling, but screw it. That's Aaron Judge. I'm betting on the horse that got me here. And you know what? I understand. That makes, again, it doesn't make sense as in I agree with it, but I can at least, there is a step A, a step B, and a step C that I can clearly follow that my eyes can recognize. What he did to Anthony Rizzo last year or 2 years ago, whatever it was, when Anthony Rizzo had a neck injury and a concussion for 2.5 months, and he just kept playing him for month after month, day after day, game after game. That, to me, is by far stupider than what he did in this World Series. That is a much more fireable offense, what he did to Anthony Rizzo, than what he does in this World Series, and sticking with his best player in the World Series. To me, not making any kind of lineup adjustments when you see a guy that you're paying $18 million a year in Josh Donaldson stinking up the joint for 1.5 years and refusing to not play him. Moving Miguel Andujar to third base because you think his bat is good enough to justify the fact that he had a fielding percentage in the 800s, which means 80%, because he can't play third base. Mm-hmm. And then he immediately goes to another team and plays outfield, and he's much better because that's what he is. He's an outfielder. Doing those things are way more fireable offense to me, because that's just you making stupid choices with your roster that you've been given. Sticking with a guy who just hit 60 home runs for you this year and hit 63 home runs for you 2 years ago in the playoffs when you don't feel like you got any other choice, that I can at least follow the logic. But all those other things, those to me are way worse. Now, are the stakes as high? Absolutely not. No. They're not even close to being as high. But that doesn't mean that they're not as stupid or not more stupid. To me, they're more stupid, in my opinion. Now, again, given how high the stakes were, you probably have to put Giancarlo Stanton in the 3-hole. You have to. Because Aaron Judge was in his own head like crazy. Now, granted, if the Yankees do pull out Game 5 and Aaron Judge has that good offensive game, maybe Aaron Judge goes bananas in Game 6 and Game 7. We don't know. And we're having a different conversation today. But guess what? They didn't win that game. They didn't win that game. But anyway, does that kind of perspective change your mind at all? Or
I will say I like what you said. And that's a take I haven't really heard too frequently, is that, you know, we shouldn't have expected anything else. The writing's been on the wall. You know, he's thrown a similar lineup out there, you know, time after time after time after time. Mm-hmm. And when you put it in, like, you know, the perspective of, you know, at least we can, you know, we understand his theology, essentially. And, like, you know, and this is the Bible college in me, but as long as it's consistent, I can respect it.
Yeah.
However, managing a World Series game is completely different than, you know, trying to
absolutely,
you know, going on a roll throughout the entire season. If you're throughout the entire season, Judge absolutely stays in the 3-hole until he, you know, snaps out of it, because we know what he's capable of. If it keeps going for, like, you know, upward, like, you know, 3-4 weeks, maybe a month, and you're like, okay, we might need to reconsider, have a talk, something like that. But this is the World Series. If one of the biggest pet peeves that I have whenever you ask anybody and they're like, how are you going to prepare for the World Series? And it's pretty consistent. If you walk up there and say, oh, it's just another game, you are going to get everything thrown at you and you are not going to be ready for it.
Yeah.
Because I don't care what you say, it is not just another game.
Sure.
It is an all-out bloodbath between two teams that are on fire, on a roll, where you've got to find a way to scrape together 4 wins before the other team does.
Yep.
In that situation as a manager, you have to look at sometime, and this is where it gets tricky, and this is why, they get paid more than they probably some people are comfortable with. But you have to look and be like, what do I have right now today that can best guarantee that I, can scrape together some runs? And Boone had plenty of options that he did not take. For one, we've talked about how inconsistent Volpe is. The way he was hitting, you slide him up to the leadoff spot. Make him be the catalyst, the spark plug, get as many at-bats as possible. Leave Soto in the 2-hole. You throw Giancarlo 3 because he was seeing marshmallows for a big period. You want him to be up with runners on base. Get Volpe on there for him, do some damage on the base pass, let Giancarlo knock him in. Let Jazz hit in the 4-hole, which he eventually did. He eventually did that. I'll give him, a golf clap for that. Sure. Congratulations. You did the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And then, slide Judge into the 5-hole. So, he can still do some damage, but he doesn't have the increased pressure of I need to perform right now. Because I don't think we really fully touched onto this in the Aaron Judge slump, thing. But it's just amplified times 10 when you are the guy that the team relies on. And anybody that's played baseball knows the 3-hole is one of the most important places that you can hit in the entire order.
Yep.
And when you're going through a stretch where you're hitting sub 200, sub 150, the pressure multiplies by 10 when you're hitting in the 3-hole because, no matter what, you're going to be up with some people on base, some pretty pivotal at bats. You're going to be up in the first inning. It's a really stressful place to be. So you want to put Giancarlo there. But I'll say my gripes with Boone, and this is coming from a Braves fan that hasn't watched as many Yankees games as I'm sure you have, being a Red Sox guy. But I was not aware that and this is an intangible that you can't really measure with statistics, his feel for the pulse of the game was horrible.
Always has been.
Horrible.
Hey guys, sorry for this quick interruption, but you're going to see right here that very shortly after this part of the conversation, my headphones ended up abruptly quitting on me. And so the only thing I had to actually record myself with was my normal standing microphone here. Problem with that is now there is a kickback or a bounce back on Andy's dialogue. So the way it works, for those of you who are not super familiar with how this goes, is his voice was coming through my speaker here, and that's what my recording software was picking up. But it was also recording an input on this microphone, and the microphone obviously picks up external noise. And so basically what you're gonna see, unfortunately, for the rest of this video is that there is an echo whenever Andy speaks because it's being picked up through my microphone and being recorded through the speaker as well. There was nothing that I could do about it at the time. There was nothing that I could do to change it. It just was what it was. So unfortunately, that is just something that I have to deal with. I've spent the last several hours trying to fix it, trying to come up with different settings that I could do to get the noise down. And unfortunately, there's just nothing that I could do that's not locked behind a paywall. So unfortunately, that's just how it goes. Hopefully, you guys understand, and hopefully, it's not too debilitating to listen to. I don't think it is personally. I actually think that Andy's cadence is actually okay with echoing for the most part, so it's not too bad. I'm sorry. It is what it is. But I wanted to give you guys a fair warning that that's what it's going to be. So yeah, hopefully you guys still enjoy the video, and obviously I'll continue to make adjustments in terms of how I'll be recording these sessions in the future. All right, folks, sorry about that, but I had some technical difficulties with my headphones. They died on me in the middle of this. They just literally, there was no low battery warning. It was just, beep, beep, they were just done. They just quit. So I had to switch things up here, so I hated to interrupt you, Andy, but go ahead, continue with, you were talking about Aaron Boone's feel for the pulse of the game.
Yes, I was mid-slandering Aaron Boone, but anyway, one of the most intangible things that, I rank managers by, and there's no way to measure it, it's just how good of a feel for the pulse of the game there is. Pulse of the game is one of the reasons I highly argue that all pitch calls should come between, catcher and pitcher, leave the coaches out of it, stuff like that. But to an extent, you have to have a feel for what's going on. And I didn't realize that Aaron Boone's was that terrible. There's a few reasons I could get into, why it was bad and everything. But I'm going to go with the 8th inning of Game 5 into one of the most notable things where I was like, what is this man doing? Situation, first two batters of the inning got on for the Dodgers. Will Smith's up to the plate. No outs, runners on first and second. The one on second being the go-ahead run that could potentially, win the World Series. And Will Smith is up, who, while it's a bunt situation, Will Smith is not up there to bunt. We know this. And I saw Boone play Anthony Rizzo about 30 feet away from home plate, just basically standing on top of Will Smith. That way, if, he lays it down, he can go snipe the guy at third. We're all good, stuff like that. But in the situation, everybody knows Will Smith is not going to bunt. And there's numerous reasons you can look at that.
Yeah.
One, there's like a giant graphic that pops up, and it's like, Will Smith has not bunted in a game since like 2016 or something like that. So you're like, granted, World Series and all, Will Smith's not up there to bunt. Two, if you look at the way the Yankees were playing defense at the time, a sacrifice bunt, you could get the same product getting a routine ground ball to shortstop the way they were playing defense that game. Like, Will Smith is not going to bunt, and yet he's got Anthony Rizzo cheating way up front. And if I'm Will Smith, what I'm doing in that situation, if I see the entire right side of the infield, playing in bunt defense, I'm like, oh, I can just, wait back a little bit, be late, ground ball through the right side is a run. That was one of the examples that I felt that his pulse of the game was horrible. The one thing I came on to this planning on slandering him furthermore for bringing Nestor in at the end of Game 1.
Oh.
I'm actually going to turn the page a little bit unexpectedly, but I think in hindsight, bringing in Nestor was the correct call in the situation. This might be a very hot take, especially to give, in the time frame of this video. But everybody knows the main reason Nestor was on the roster in the first place was Shohei Ohtani, anecdote or whatever, If he's up there in a situation, you're going to, toss Nestor out there and, try to get through it. And to be fair, Nestor did his job every time he faced Ohtani, got him out twice. I go back and forth, you would think it's the obvious call to set up the lefty-lefty matchup and walk Betts to get to Freeman in that situation. But I don't know. I feel like given the situation, Freddie hits lefties, righty. A dude could like grow a tail and throw it with a tail, and Freddie's going to hit it. It don't matter lefty, righty, whatever. At the time, Freddie is the hotter bat than Mookie. Now it's a lose-lose situation, but
Well, Mookie has consistently struggled against left-handed pitching his entire career. He's much worse against lefties, so having a lefty face Mookie is not, to me, in and of itself, is not necessarily the worst decision to make.
Right, and I mean, and at the end of the day, you can say, yeah, you set up an out at any base because you've got an open base, but like, at some point you've got to be like, you're major leaguers. You can make a defensive play if the ball's hit to you one way or the other, Is facing Freddie in that situation with the winning run on second which it was on second regardless. You know, because of the incredible play Verdugo made. Is that really that much better of a situation than facing Mookie? I would argue, hindsight, you know, being 2020, being candid, it's not that much better of a situation facing Freddie there.
Right.
But no, I mean, there was several things, and like, I don't know if you blame the lack of fundamentals that the Yankees showed off on the manager. I think that's a coaching, an organizational fail. But one can't deny the basic fundamentals that the Yankees showcase, you know, throughout the entire World Series were horrible. Like, I mean, they would give up 10 runs a game if they played at Russell Morgan. We all know this. They could not, you know, the routine plays were not routine.
No.
And the bare minimum I expect when I'm watching a major league game, I almost borderline expect this in college baseball games that I watch. You have to make the routine plays routine. And they consistently have not done that. And then furthermore, when I was going through, you know, this is a point that was brought up on the Talking Yanks podcast. I did not come up with this, but they mentioned it, and it definitely resonated with me. The last homegrown talent that the Yankees have developed essentially is Aaron Judge. That's been generational. Sure, you can say maybe Volpe and Wells are kind of halfway there. But you cannot win big games just buying your players. You have to be able to develop some unsung heroes that will come through and, you know, when it matters most and make the routine plays routine. There is something significant missing from the Yankees franchise right now that is going to hold them back from winning a World Series soon. If they, you know, keep, you know, the same, you know, people in the same position. They don't have what it takes to win in the biggest stage.
All right, well, let me ask you this. I have a lot of things I want to say to that, but let me ask you this. How much homegrown talent did the Dodgers have?
I believe less than the Yankees. I mean, I don't count. I don't count.
Exactly.
That's a fair point, actually. I guess
so you can win a World Series just by buying your players. So I'm sorry, but I'm calling a spade here.
Walker Buehler, you can give him half credit for Max Muncy because while he wasn't homegrown, he definitely.
I mean, he might as well be. Well, we'll give him credit for Max Muncy. That's fine.
We'll give him Will Smith too.
Will Smith's great. Yeah, you had a little bit, but most of your key players are bought. Most of them. Like, you got Kershaw, obviously. You got Buehler. You got Will Smith. Like you said, you got Gavin Lux. You know, so you got some, but you don't have a lot. Just like the Yankees, they have some. They don't have a lot, but they got some. But the difference. Oh, go ahead.
Their guys made the routine plays routine. I know for a fact when they brought in Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani, they looked at Max Muncy and they said, "Hey, you are going to learn to play third base, or you do not have room to play on this team."
Yep.
Made it very cut and dry, and when and Muncy was like, "Well, I guess I better get good at third base then." The Yankees haven't done anything even close to that. I mean. We were marveling defensively at Jazz Chisholm, who is not a third baseman. That is just one really athletic dude that they can just throw anywhere on the field and make, diamonds, When he is the defensive star, that is mainly there just off sheer athletic ability that you can't coach into somebody. There's a problem.
I do want to talk about, I do want to answer your call on, you said, and I quote, "I don't think I can blame Aaron Boone for the lack of routine plays or the lack of development." You absolutely can blame Aaron Boone for the lack of routine plays and the lack of development. And here's why. Again, this is not new. This is who the Yankees bring in every year. They bring guys in that are below average fielders, or they bring in a bunch of guys that not all play the same position, but that play similar positions in the same position as other guys on the team. and then they switch all their positions around to make it work. And so they have 2 guys minimum that are playing out of position, that they're just learning how to play on the fly. Mm-hmm. Do you remember Clint Frazier?
I very much remember.
Miguel Andujar? Yeah. Indeed. This is not a new thing. This is what they do. They take guys, they move them in positions. Now, look, they just did it with Jazz Chisholm. Now, luckily for them, Jazz Chisholm is making it work. Jazz Chisholm is really good at playing third base. Jazz Chisholm's actually a great athlete and a really good fielder that they moved to a position where he's actually shining and doing really well. But guess what? They got lucky this time. Every other time they've done it, it's been terrible. All of them, every time. Every single time. It does not work. Hell, they even did it to Aaron Judge. They moved a 6'8" behemoth who's not all that fast to center field. Because they didn't have really anybody else that could play center field because they got rid of all their center fielders. And then guess what? They traded for a center fielder in Jazz Chisholm and they moved him to third base. Like, I don't know what we're doing here. Like, you can absolutely blame Aaron Boone. This is the culture that he has curated. He is Go ahead.
I hear your argument, but I'm going to talk Braves here for a minute and think one of the many reasons that, sure, there were injuries and things we couldn't control, but I'm also going to die on the hill that one of the reasons there was a significant drop-off from 2023 to 2024 was the lack of Ron Washington and Eric Young Jr. on the coaching staff.
Yep.
Those two practice disciplines that, the guys bought into. They did so good at it, they got a promotion up to the Angels up in Anaheim as, head honcho, first mate, whatever you want to call it. Manager, bench coach, I guess.
Sure.
But, and I don't think I would credit Brian Snitker with what Washington and EY brought to the table.
Okay.
If you could, you would say that the guys he brought in to replace them could easily mimic what they brought, and just the daily disciplines, daily grind, stuff like that. Didn't work out that way. But also, it's not like Washington and EY were able to go to Anaheim and, flip their culture into something completely different. They failed in every aspect of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's and the reality of it is sometimes because you are a really good little coach does not equate that you can be a great big coach.
Okay. Well,
and while of course the big coach's job is to help coordinate what the little coaches are doing, and you could definitely say Aaron Boone, knowing basically 1% of the whole story that I do. You could say he's probably not doing that. I can't say the entire blame on the lack of fundamentals is 100% on Boone. It is a complete organizational failure.
Oh no, it is absolutely a complete organizational failure. I'm not simply solely putting the blame on Aaron Boone. But to absolve him of the blame is not good either. And I'll tell you the main crux of my argument as to why I would put most of the blame onto Aaron Boone. So there are a couple of, obviously we talked quite a bit extensively about the way he coaches and the way he kind of does things and the reason he makes these decisions. There's one thing that permeates throughout the entirety of his coaching tenure in New York. And it boils down to one word, which I will dive deeper into because that's actually not even the real issue. The real issue is underneath it. This right here boils down to one word. Stubbornness. The man utterly refuses to change his ways. He refuses to look at certain analytics and have them change his mind. He refuses to admit when he makes mistakes. He refuses to just do basic things that a good coach does. When bad things happen and make adjustments on the fly. Those don't happen. When you talked to me the other day and you said, is it a fireable offense for him to stick to Aaron Judge? And my response to you was, out of all of the things I've seen Aaron Boone do, this is the least fireable of all of the things. The reason I said that is because for the last 7 years, or however long he's been coaching, it might be 6, whatever it is, This is what he does. He sticks with what he has. He does not make adjustments. He does not change. So maybe it's fatigue and lack of empathy or just pure apathy of seeing him, have a guy who's hitting 140 stay in the 3-hole and have him suffer. Because that's what Aaron Boone does. That's what he's always done his entire tenure. So maybe that's my bias, my fault. I'm willing to accept that. But underneath that stubbornness, what did Aaron Boone do before he became a coach? Andy?
Well, he was a player.
He was a player. There you go.
So
he is a player's coach. And underneath that stubbornness that I just talked about, underneath the refusal to change, refusal to make adjustments, why is that? Because he was a player, which means he looks at the player and he says, I trust you. I trust you to figure it out. You don't need me to help you figure it out. I'm not going to figure it out for you. So guess what he does to Aaron Judge? He makes him sit in that 3-hole until he figures it out because he was a player. And that's what he was hoping that coaches would do for him. That, oh, just leave me in the lineup, coach, I'll figure it out. Oh, just leave me in, coach, I'll figure it out. Oh, don't take me out, coach, I'll figure it out. That's what he would want because he was a player. That's what he thinks. That's what he believes. He's going to stick with a guy. Yeah, sure, leave Nestor in to face Mookie. Let him pitch to him. I trust him. I was a player. I would trust me in that spot. Oh, yeah, leave Anthony Rizzo in the lineup for 2 months with a concussion. Now, again, I said in the video the other day, I'm gonna say this here. It's highly possible that Aaron Boone had no idea that Anthony Rizzo was hurt, okay? I'm not sitting here saying that Aaron Boone intentionally threw an injured guy out there hobbling up to the plate delirious and dizzy for 2 months. I'm not saying that that's what he did. I would hope to God that's not what he did, but there's no evidence for that. But Anthony Rizzo was hitting like 112 for like 2 months. Like, even just that, like, dude, bench him, dear God. Like, he's awful right now. There's something wrong. You can't look at a guy, like, even if you could looked at him and couldn't tell he was injured, literally injured, you're going to look at a guy hitting 112 who's as good as Anthony Rizzo was, and you're not going to be like, something doesn't seem right here. Even if you can't put your finger on what that thing is, you're not going to think something's wrong. You're just going to keep throwing him out there? Yeah, because that's what Aaron Boone would do when he was a player. Or that's what he would want to do when he was a player. Oh, just leave him in. He'll be fine. That's the underlying problem. He does not want to take a player out of the lineup. He doesn't want to move him down. He wants all of his players to fit in like a Tetris block perfectly. And even when they're not fitting, he just says, well, it is what it is. That's what he does. That's what he does. So I absolutely can blame Aaron Boone.
That's a
for
really
the way this is
argument, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not getting into coaching yet, because I know I do, like, say a pitcher's got like 100 pitches through 150 pitches through 8 innings. I'm gonna be like, oh, he wants to finish it. We're gonna roll him right back out there.
Yeah,
I don't think.
But you gotta earn that.
If I was in that situation, but is it responsible? No.
But you gotta earn that. You got to earn that if you're a player. Like, you've got to have gone out. You've got to have put in work. Like, listen, for me, if it was Kershaw out there and he went 8 shutout innings and he's 110 pitches deep and he's 38 years old and he's huffing and puffing and he's only throwing 84 miles an hour and that man looks at me and says, I want the ball, I'm not coming out, I'm giving him the damn ball.
Well,
I am. I'm giving him the ball because he's earned it.
Essentially, Judge has put in the work, limping out there.
No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. How many World Series has he been in? How many playoffs has he played well in?
But he certainly put up. Look, he broke out in 17.
Regular season is not the postseason.
He's well over 6 solid years of being the anchor of the team.
Absolutely. When that video comes out on Saturday, I think it's going to be Saturday. This will come out on Saturday, so maybe Friday. Go look at his postseason numbers. For his career, he's hitting below the Mendoza line in the playoffs. Aaron Judge has not earned a thing of trust. Not a lick of trust from me in the playoffs. Not a lick. You know who has? Giancarlo Stanton. Now, because he went to the World Series and he performed really well. Now I know, Yeah. Has he performed poorly in years past? Of course. But now I can at least understand if Giancarlo Stanton says, you know what, coach, I got this. I'm going to figure this out. I'll be like, okay. You've figured it out before. You know who hasn't figured it out before? Aaron Judge. He has not figured it out in the playoffs. He had one good year in the playoffs, and it was 5 games. That was it. And guess what? You know what they did in those 5 games? Lost to the Red Sox in 2018. That was it. That was the only good series. That was the only good playoff run he had. That was it. Every other year has been below 300, most of the time below 200. Mm-hmm. Horrible. He hasn't earned it. Yeah, he's a great regular season player. He has not earned my trust in the playoffs. He has not put in the work. Now, granted, you could say Kershaw hasn't put in the work either, but the difference between Aaron Judge and Clayton Kershaw is Kershaw's now won 2 World Series, and Kershaw's like 38. Like, he ain't got many years left, dude. Like, I'm giving him the ball. Point being, you've got to earn it as a coach. If Nestor Cortez came to me and said, hey, coach, I'm ready, go screw you, dude. Like, no, I'm not. He hasn't earned it. He hasn't. And that's nothing against Nestor. That's just the first name that popped in my head. But, like, that's the point for me, is you've got to earn being stuck with. And Aaron Boone has stuck with everyone. It didn't matter if they were Aaron Judge, if they were Clint Frazier, if they were Brett Gardner, it didn't matter if you were good, bad, or downright atrocious. He was sticking with you. You weren't getting benched. He wasn't making adjustments. You were in there. Look at Josh Donaldson. What did Josh Donaldson ever do in a New York Yankee uniform to earn playing every day for a year and a half? Nothing.
A whole lot.
And he played every day for a year and a half until they traded him. And guess what? If they didn't trade him, he'd have still been playing every single day at third base, hitting 180. He would have just kept whiffing.
I will say Yankees Josh Donaldson, to me, is like an extended version of the Braves Jose Bautista experiment way back when.
Yeah, and at least y'all had that for like 3 months and went, all right, I'm done with this. This is horrible. I can't do it. The Yankees were like, yeah, give him another year. We'll see what happens. Like, no. It's just, and by the way, you know what? You know what's even funnier about that? You know who they traded for Josh Donaldson, right? Gio Urshela. He was about the only guy who played third base that was any good for them for the last 5 years. And they traded him for Josh Donaldson, who was awful for them.
I will say, if I learned one thing, it's just how good Gio Urshela is. Like,
yeah, he was very good.
But like, it's the Yankees shouldn't be this bad at judging talent.
Yeah, exactly. But go ahead.
And the consistent amount of talented people that roll through and don't succeed is alarming. And Clint Frazier, I think, is the pinnacle example of that.
Absolutely.
I from the second he got drafted, I thought he was generational. I think he still could have been. Yeah. But he was not developed properly at all. And yeah, sure, there were some there were some behavior issues or whatnot, but like to an extent, you've got to be able, when you draft a kid out of high school, you've got to be willing to be like, okay, this is how you be a grown man and you handle things. It's clear that was overlooked, and that's probably the most important part of the minor league experience.
Yeah, and I pray that Jason Dominguez gets traded this offseason. Because if he does not get traded this offseason, he will be out of the MLB by 2029. He will not last another 5 years. He won't last till he's 28. He will be out of the MLB by the time he's 27 years old, because they cannot develop talent. And again, yes, a lot of that has to do with your organization. A lot of that has to do with your minor league system. I fully understand that. It makes sense to me. But at the end of the day, you are the head coach. You are the one that is in charge of putting players in the best position to succeed. And year after year after year after year, yes, the general manager and all of them have not given him the best tools at times. I'm fully aware. But at the end of the day, Aaron Boone has to put guys in the best position he thinks that they're going to be in. But most importantly, if and when he discovers that the positions he put players in are not what's best for the team, he then has to have the guts and have the patience and have the humility to say, all right, I tried this. We have to go in a different direction now. We got to start changing some things up. We got to start bringing guys up from the minor leagues. We got to start, I got to start peppering these guys to trade for, this specific position. They didn't have a left fielder for like 2 years. But they had 8 million outfielders in their minor league system that they could have called up, that they could have done something with, right? It's just, it's baffling to me. And again, I know that part's not necessarily Aaron Boone's fault. But
I will say that if Aaron Boone has the stupidity, which he might, after the Yankees, get Juan Soto to say, I was not given the talent to be successful, he will be run out of there, rightfully so fast.
I absolutely love that you brought that up, because that was actually going to be the next talking point that I wanted to bring up with you, Andy, which is what are the chances that Juan Soto resigns in New York? Do you think it's high?
Lower now. Like, it reminds me, if the World Series goes different, I would say there's a good chance. Because, like it or not, there's only a few teams that have the amount of money that it will take to land Juan Soto. Not every team can afford him.
Nope.
That's just the reality of the MLB. Yankees are one of like maybe 4 or 5 that even have the ability to get him.
Yeah. You got Dodgers, you got Phillies, you got Mets, you got Red Sox, you got Yankees. Who else?
I think the Braves have a small sliver of a chance. I don't think we'll empty the pocketbook.
I think that you could. I'll could.
AA has gone on record of saying, like, for whatever, like it's taxes or something, but he's got money to spend. He's been very candid about that.
Right, you could, but the history of the Braves tells me $55-60 million a year is not something you guys are willing to shell. Now, listen, I would actually be thrilled if he went to the Braves. Because in my opinion, well, obviously, I would love for him to come to the Red Sox, because the Red Sox
broke the bank on Acuna already. We've extended Austin Riley. We've basically committed highway robbery to get Ozzie Albies for dirt cheap, next to nothing.
Yeah, and Spencer Strider, by the way.
And Spencer Strider. And I would highly anticipate Spencer Schwellenbach's getting something very similar.
Sure.
Soon, if he repeats what he did at the end of this year, which I think he will.
Yeah. Hey, can you guys stop with Charlie Morton? Wouldn't that be fun to not anymore?
We need to stop with Charlie Morton.
Yeah.
I would outright say at this point we could probably leverage a trade with the Yankees and just go straight up Charlie Morton for Jason Dominguez, and it's win-win.
that'd be fun.
Like, hey, look, take your super talented outfielder. We'll give you this 40-year-old man that's
dude. If the Yankees traded Jason Dominguez for Charlie Morton, I don't think I'd ever stop laughing. I literally think I would be physically incapable of quitting laughing. I'd have to not get a job anymore. I'd have to just live at home and just be a guy that laughs. That would be my life.
I think I would be the guy that just skips and prances everywhere, like a little happy little person. And
that's it. That's it.
Comfortable to see Andy going skipping around everywhere. And they're just like, Andy, what's going on? I'm like, Charlie Morton for Jason
Dominguez. This is his whole thing.
But
oh goodness. No, but Juan Soto, I would be thrilled. For me, obviously the Red Sox are one of those teams that could sign him. We have a ton of money. Mm-hmm. We've spent on guys like that in the past. We've let all of our talent go, and we need somebody to build our roster around outside of Rafael Devers. Now, the likelihood of that is quite small, and also we really need to focus. Even though, weirdly, we had one of the best rotations in baseball this year by the numbers, it made no sense because on paper, our team is poo in pitching, but that made no sense. But we need an ace. If we're going to spend 30, 40, whatever $million a year, we got to get an ace. It's not going to work without it. So there's a small chance. So if that doesn't happen, then the two most likely scenarios in my mind for Juan Soto is the Yankees, which I do not want to see him in pinstripes for the next 15 years, or the Dodgers, which I'm going to cry myself to sleep if they're just like, yeah, Shohei, yeah, Mookie, yeah, Juan Soto, yeah, Freddie Freeman, yeah. They'd just be throwing money around one of those I don't even know, like one of those Ocean 11, like the Ocean 11 movies where it's just like all this money in the vault, like $11 billion in this vault, and they're just like, yes, this is what we pay our players in, and I have a second vault for all of the rest of the employees that only has $7 and a pack of bubble gum in it.
The comparison I make for the Dodgers, like coming as a fan of any team that's not the Dodgers, they're like the kid in the arcade that has figured out that jackpot machine, the timing of it, and they're just getting like 1,000 tickets at the snap of the fingers, and you're out here just trying to play skee ball, and you're getting nothing, and you're just like, and you just look over and you're like, I am trying significantly harder than they are, but they're going to be the one walking away with the giant teddy bear.
Yeah,
and it's annoying. But unfortunately, I think the Dodgers are probably the most likely location for Soto out of those options. Mainly because the comments I saw of him, like with interviews after, it reminded me a lot of Garrett Cole's after the 2019 World Series. Cole was more upset than Soto for obvious reasons. But both left with like a bitter taste in their mouth, largely due to the coaching staff, I think, because if we've got this much to talk about Aaron Boone, I can only imagine how much more Juan Soto has to complain about than us.
I can't imagine.
I'd imagine he's got a whole lot more, though. And like, even when they ask him, they're like, so because they asked him, they were like, hey, so are you going to come back to the Yankees? And he was like, oh, I wouldn't, put any weight. I think every team's got the same equal opportunity. If there was good chances, he would be like, hey, these are my boys, I love them, whatever.
No.
But he didn't even say
he's going to the highest bidder. He doesn't care where he goes. He's going to the highest bidder. He's won his World Series. He's 26 years old or 27. I don't know where his birthday falls, but he's somewhere in that range. Like, he's saying, I'm going to go somewhere for $400, $500, $600 million, and that's just going to be that. And then we're going to figure it out from there.
Somewhere that can win in the big games. Because at the end of the day, I don't care. We can get into this all day. I don't think obviously, 100 million's like different, like a lot of money. But if you go play for the Dodgers for $400 million and win like 5 World Series with those juggernauts, that's almost worth it more than getting paid $500 million to be a part of the Yankees that are just, the stubborn horse doing the same thing over and over again. At the end of the day, while $100 million is a lot of money, the difference between, that much at that point, it's like almost like a concept we covered in like the business school, where it's like the hierarchy of needs. At some point, the need up at the very top is going to be winning championships. And when you make so much money that you're not out there having to worry about, oh, I need to make sure, my kids can go to college, or I can, afford my mortgage or stuff like that, which even if he didn't work for the rest of his life, he'd be set in that regard. Your main focus is going to be, where can I go to leave a legacy as one of the greatest baseball players to ever walk on this planet? And he's got a decent shot to be really high up there on the all-time greats if he plays his cards right.
Of course. Yeah, so, he's a once-in-a-generation type player, just like Ohtani. Now, I'm not saying he's as good as Ohtani. He's not, clearly. Nobody is. But it's one of those things where, like, Juan Soto is your modern-day Ted Williams.
Right, and comparing Soto to Ohtani is like comparing Peyton Manning to Ray Lewis. They're both incredible.
Two different styles.
Comparing the two of them is not, it's just a waste of time.
Exactly. But
people that both bring stuff that we have not seen in the game in like ever,
yeah, for sure. And so
that you're going to empty the piggy bank to get to play for you.
Yeah, and I think we all have the Washington Nationals to thank right now, because if they didn't have the guts to call up a kid who'd only played 30 professional games to their major league roster because of all their injuries at 18 years old, Juan Soto would be a free agent at 29 like everybody else. But he's a free agent at 26 because the Nationals were psychopaths and decided to call up a kid, and for some godforsaken reason, they happen to just call up the one kid that had the best eye that anybody's ever seen in baseball. Like, it's just like they just happened to get it right, and they didn't screw up his development somehow. I mean, he was just that good, and you know that doesn't come around very often. So thank you, Washington, for that. But it's one of those things where like a 26-year-old outfielder who's hitting unrestricted free agency, that's one of the best hitters in the entirety of the game of baseball, and by one of the, I mean like number 3.
Right.
In baseball. That does not happen ever. I can't remember this happening. I can't remember a free agent that was this young and this good ever happening in the last at least like 10 years. Right?
Right. And like,
even Bryce Harper was 28, 29 years old when he hit free agency.
And like, given the situation, this is potentially a once in a lifetime, situation.
Yep.
And it's difficult because the Braves in me is like, oh, well, we can just use that money to sign the 5 players that are good. But Juan Soto is very much going to live up to the hype, as long as his eye stays as good as it is.
Yep. Exactly. And that's
I don't see that going anywhere, because even if he gets in a slump with Aaron Judge, like, esque, where can't hit water if he fell out of a boat, he will still be able to take his walks.
Yep.
And when you can, when you're struggling, you can just still spit on a pitch this far outside without even batting an eye. That is unheard of.
For sure. And that's what the beauty of Juan Soto is. Even when he's playing poor, even when he's, not hitting the ball that well, even when he's not hitting home runs, he's going to still find a way to get on base. That's how it's always been. His bad years have been 380 on base. Like, right. His good years have been 440 on base, right? So, like, like, you're going to be somewhere in there. And so, you're getting a guy that minimum is going to get on base 38 to 40% of the time. Even if he only hits 250 or 260 for you because he's having a bad year. So, I don't know if that's worth $60 million a year to you or to me or to an organization in baseball. I don't know if they're willing to take that risk. But I tell you what, I have always been the guy that says, man, nobody is worth more than $300 to $350 million in the game of baseball. It's ridiculous if people pay. Like, the Shohei Ohtani contract was absolutely obscene. I don't care how good Shohei Ohtani is. There ain't no way I'm paying $70 million a year for anybody. Juan Soto is the one guy that if somebody came out and said, I'm paying him $60 million a year, I would still be like, oh, that's quite a bit. But I understand. Like, that, he's the one guy. Age, skill set. Because I look at it from, like, you kind of mentioned it. As guys get older, skills start to diminish. Juan Soto doesn't rely on his athleticism. Juan Soto doesn't rely on his speed. Juan Soto doesn't rely on brute strength that can go away as you age into your 30s and 40s. He relies on technique. He relies on a sweet, quick swing. And he relies on a phenomenal eye. And all 3 of those things, while I'm sure they will regress a little bit, they're much less likely to fall off a cliff than somebody like, say, an Aaron Judge, who is just big, me, beefy, strong, I hit ball far, rah. Like, that's, like, eventually, your body's going to quit. Especially with all the injuries that Judge has dealt with, of course. Right. And Juan Soto, by the way, I'm going to, find some wood over here and knock a little bit. This is a guy that stayed healthy for the vast majority of his career, too. So he's got a track record of durability as well, which you can't say for everybody. Even like Bryce Harper when he was a free agent, or Mike Trout when he was a free agent. Like, these are guys that had injury track records, but people went, yeah, but they're Bryce Harper. Yeah, but they're Mike Trout, so it's fine. Juan Soto doesn't even have that either. So this is a perfect, like, concoction of everything you would could possibly want in a free agent. Age, skill set that can develop into his 30s and 40s, and durability and reliability. And, by the way, big game experience and has won a championship. Like, he checks all the boxes. There's not a box on planet Earth that Juan Soto doesn't check.
Like, if you had to tell me, find a former major leaguer to compare Juan Soto to, what I'm going to say might sound ridiculous, but I feel like you might agree with me here. He is Barry Bonds that can win a World Series. That is the comparison-ish.
Not
Even
the
if you
old,
look early
not
in
even.
his career, I feel
I
like
don't know.
Juan
I'd say
Soto's
more Ted
early
Williams.
years are really close to where Barry Bonds was at that
Sure,
age.
but not stolen base, not in the stolen base department or in the home run department.
Well, yeah, but I mean, when you look at the hit tool combined with the eye tool, which sure maybe they're the same thing or whatever. Barry Bonds, it's like you almost got to get like an eye like Tony Gwynn on a body of somebody that hits like 40 to 50 home runs a year.
Yeah,
that is unheard of.
Ted
The only
Williams.
man that's even close to that I can even think of with those two tools that high is Barry. Now, obviously, Barry Bonds is the ceiling of what Juan Soto can be. But how many people could you even realistically say could reach that ceiling?
Well, obviously, nobody.
I guess anybody's capable, but realistically, Juan Soto's the closest that I've ever seen to it.
Sure. Well, all right, Andy.
And even if he's not Barry Bonds, it's not like it's a bad deal to be a step down from that.
For sure. For sure. I'm with you. Well, all right, Andy. I have kept you long enough, sir. I know you got to get going here. I thank you for dealing with the technical difficulties. Thank you for dealing with. I know I'm getting a slight delay, so sometimes I start talking, you start talking, and we're both start talking at different times. So I do apologize for any of that there. But dude, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. Hopefully, we'll get you back on soon here. And again, just thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me turn my yap on there for a little bit. And,
of course, man.
Sure, we'll do it again soon. We'll bring another baseball friend of ours with us. I don't know who yet. We got a lot of good options though. So
absolutely. And thank you guys so very much for watching. I appreciate all of your guys' support over the last few weeks, especially since I've been gone. The quizzes have been doing great. So thank you guys so very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.